Welcome to another episode of Fertility Unlocked. I'm Courtney Saye. I'm so glad you're here joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about secondary infertility. So if you are trying to conceive your second, your third, your fourth baby, this episode is going to be specially made for you. You'll definitely want to stay tuned. If you are working on your first successful pregnancy, this is an episode that you may want to skip forward on and go to the next one. So, secondary infertility is something we see so much in our practice, and there are unique reasons for it that can be a little bit different from primary infertility. I myself went through secondary infertility, and again, so have so many of our clients. It also brings unique challenges emotionally, spiritually, mentally with it that are a little bit different from when you're trying to conceive your first. One thing I notice is that when you're trying to conceive additional children, whether it's your second or your fourth, you don't get as much sympathy from society as a whole, from friends and family. It's like, well, aren't you glad you've got older kids? But I will stand firm in this belief for my entire life that if you have the desire, the deep desire to have another baby, if you don't feel your family is complete, that desire, that need is primal, it's spiritual, it's gonna make me emotional. It is something you can't ignore. So whether it's your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth, if you feel you're not done yet and you're called to have another baby and you're not able to do so, that hurt is real. And I want to validate that because society as a whole does not. I went through this myself, and I also find that in my own journey and with clients we serve, that it can be a lot more confusing than primary infertility. Because here's the deal. If you have infertility when you're trying to have your first baby, that's your experience. It's like you only know what you know in life, right? And if you had no problem getting pregnant with your first or your first couple of kids, and then you can't get pregnant and there's no reason for it, and you don't understand what's going on, that's incredibly confusing on top of all of the other grief that naturally comes along with infertility. The other piece of this that's incredibly unique that I remember so clearly from when I was going through my own struggles trying to get pregnant with my second is that every month that passes is not only more time passing that you don't have your baby in your arms, but you are not only thinking of yourself and your husband, but you're also thinking about your older child. You're also grieving for that sibling relationship that isn't there, right? I had my son, and for those of you who haven't heard my whole story, I had my son with no effort. Like it was, oh my gosh, I guess I'm one of those fertile people. Uncomplicated pregnancy. He was born. I got pregnant again very easily. Second month trying. He had just turned 1. And I thought, again, guess I'm one of those fertile people. And then I got slapped in the face. I was 17 weeks pregnant and had a miscarriage. Went for my anatomy scan. Day before Thanksgiving, we were going to host our family. We were all excited to I knew I wasn't going to be able to wait, but I was hoping I could take the gender in an envelope and share it with both sides of the family. That was the only thing on my mind when I walked into that ultrasound room. And then I was told there was no heartbeat anymore. And that day, in some ways, life is before and after that day, because there was so much innocent naivety about the fertility journey up through that point and what people could go through. And we lost the baby, and I had a DNC, and the holidays were awful. And I kept telling myself, you get pregnant easily. The thing that's going to carry you through this is you get pregnant easily. As soon as you're cleared, you'll get pregnant again, and you'll be able to breathe. This grief will lift. Well, I should have dealt with the grief. That's a whole nother episode, instead of just trying to get pregnant right away. But I didn't get pregnant right away. I dealt with what's called unexplained secondary infertility, which many of you are probably in that boat where I was so confused. Wait a minute, but I get pregnant easily. So now I've had a loss and now I can't get pregnant. And it's confusing. And it's there has to be an answer. There has to be a reason. And every month that went by was like, oh, okay. I had this vision of we were going to have 2 kids and it was 2 under 2 and I had planned for all of that. And I was ready for it. And then every month that went by was like another month getting further and further and further away from watching my kids grow up together. And that hurts. That hurts really bad. And so, we got to the point where they were like, okay, we'll try Clomid. Let's see if that works. That didn't work. Okay, let's go on to the fertility doctor. Let's go through exploratory surgery. Let's run all the labs. Never an answer. Everything looks normal. Everything looks normal. Fertility treatments kept failing. Everything looks normal. Now, I eventually went on to have my daughter. I was young. I was still in my 20s. But there were biochemical imbalances in my body that I had no idea about yet. When I later went through functional practitioner training, I learned what was going on in my own body, and it had been there bubbling up all along. And if I'd had those answers when I was on my fertility journey, how different could it have looked? Would I have gone through that loss? Would I have gotten pregnant again in 3 months instead of years? If I'd only had the answers, it would have been so different. So anyway, we see a lot of women that come into our practice that are dealing with secondary infertility, and a lot of these feelings, these emotions, these stories have a lot of similar themes where they're confused. They don't understand what changed. They've had older children that are healthy. They've tried everything. There's no answers there. What in the world is going on with my body? Sometimes they will get answers like, well, you're getting older and things change as you get older. And they're 34 now or 38 now. And that's a ridiculous answer, by the way. But we see this all the time in practice. And I'll tell you, I want to share a couple of things that come up very, very commonly in functional lab testing with our secondary infertility mamas. So one thing that's not talked about nearly enough is that pregnancy is incredibly depleting. Okay. It sucks the nutrients and minerals right out of your body. You're supporting another life, right? And so it's like, well, we take prenatals. Well, that's, again, a whole nother episode on what are the right prenatals and how much do you need of these nutrients and minerals. But just know that pregnancy is incredibly depleting. So sometimes secondary infertility creeps up after one pregnancy. If you were starting from a place that wasn't abundant in your own body with nutrients, with minerals, with cellular health and energy, sometimes you can have 3 healthy pregnancies and then your body's like, enough, I am so depleted. I can barely sustain you every day, let alone additional life. So one thing we see very frequently in testing with secondary infertility mamas is a whole lot of micronutrient deficiencies. And this comes from a couple of things, but one of them is that pregnancy and breastfeeding are incredibly depleting, okay? So if you haven't looked at your micronutrient levels, your mineral levels, your amino acids, your antioxidants, that is one place where we see a lot of problems. And if those aren't optimal, any of those that we look at, it is going to create suboptimal cellular health and energy. That is the peak of what we are trying to do here, is create optimal cellular health and energy, because when you're in a state of optimal cellular health and energy, your body's coming from a place of abundance, and creating new life is a natural state for you. When you're in a state of deficiency already, your body's barely sustaining itself, creating new life is going to go on the back burner because we're barely making it here. Okay. So pregnancy is incredibly depleting. The other thing that happens is once you become a mom, you put yourself on the back burner. So a lot of our secondary infertility moms are not, I won't say they're doing a terrible job because they're trying, but they're not putting themselves first as far as taking care of their bodies and their minds. So a lot of them are under eating by quite a few calories every day. They're not getting enough food, they're not getting enough nutrition in, or they're not eating for 7, 8, 9 hours during the day, which again is going to do a couple of things. It's going to impact those micronutrient levels, but it's also going to mess with your thyroid and your nervous system. So we see thyroid issues in our practice all the time, especially with our secondary infertility mamas. And that brings up a few things. People will say, like, I had my thyroid tested, my thyroid's fine. If you've had your thyroid tested and they said it was fine, it's very likely, go back and grab your lab results if they're in Quest or MyChart and see what's in there. And it's very likely TSH and T4. TSH, if you had it run with, your local hospital system or PCP, TSH is going to probably say it's normal between 0.5 and 4.5 or 5, which is wild. We want to see it as close to 1 as possible when you're trying to get and stay pregnant, and under 2. So 0.5 to 2 is going to be optimal for fertility. T4 is interesting, but what I really want to see is a full panel. I want to see what your free T3 looks like. I want to see what reverse T3 looks like. I want to see your antibody levels. I want to see all of that, because even if your thyroid, let's say your thyroid's perfect. Let's say your thyroid hormones look perfect. Your TSH looks perfect. You have elevated antibody levels. Thyroid looks perfect. Those elevated antibody levels by themselves are a risk factor for infertility and miscarriage. By themselves, those elevated antibody levels are a risk factor for infertility and miscarriage. So you may or may not have some of these tests done. The vast majority of women who come into our program have never seen these lab values. And if they've seen any of them, they're not looked at from an optimal range. And if they are, they aren't being told what to do to correct it. So the other thing we see is women come into us after they've had a baby or 2 or 3, and they know they have a thyroid issue, and they're on levothyroxine. And they were told their thyroid looks great because, again, those levels look great according to Western medicine, but they haven't been looking at free T3. They haven't been looking at reverse T3. They haven't been looking at the antibody levels. And the levothyroxine by itself is not enough to get them to an optimal state so that they can get and stay pregnant, because thyroid health is multifaceted. And for a lot of women we work with, levothyroxine is not enough to get them all the way there. So I'll give you one more thing we commonly see in our secondary infertility mamas, and that is a lot of imbalances going on in their gut. Okay, this is related to these other things we're talking about around thyroid health and that nutrient depletion, but we will see a lot of microbiome issues going on where they've got too much bad bacteria, not enough good bacteria in the gut. They've got inflammation in there. They've got gluten sensitivity and they're eating it because they don't know. They've got maybe a parasite or yeast overgrowth. Things going on in your gut are going to have a big impact on your ability to get and stay pregnant. And there are signs that point to some of these things in your day-to-day life, but they are ignored and even kind of like made light of when you're a mom. It's like, oh, mom, life is so exhausting. It's normal to be tired. Coffee in the morning to wake up and wine to wind down. Like, I'm exhausted. I'm a mom life. But in reality, a lot of the exhaustion, a lot of the fatigue, the depression, the inability to get moving every day, the constipation, the extra 15 pounds that you can't lose, the headaches, the anxiety, a lot of that is not mom life. You shouldn't accept it as normal. It is because you've got these underlying imbalances going on. And if you've got those symptoms day to day that everyone's like, haha, being a mom is hard, a lot of those are pointing to these underlying imbalances, which are directly tied to your ability to get and stay pregnant. They're directly tied to your fertility. So lots more to talk about on secondary infertility and the emotional aspects of it, the biochemical aspects. We're going to go deep on some future episodes on exactly what these labs look like. If you like to geek out on some of the lab values and exactly what's in those, stay tuned. We're also going to have some episodes talking through the mental health aspect of all of this as we go forward. But I hope you are, finding joy in the holidays. However you do that in your life, with your family, with time alone, with exercise. And if you have any questions for us, make sure you shoot us a message on Instagram. We will answer questions on future episodes that are sent in to us. So if you have any questions about this episode or anything that's related, please send them to us. If you have a topic that you're like, I really want to know about XYZ related to secondary infertility or functional fertility, shoot us a message. We've got a list of upcoming podcasts and we will slot it in if it's something that is requested a lot. So thanks again for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your week.